Om. 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 Saishwaraya vidmahe Satyadevaya dhimahi Tanna Sat Sarva Prachodayat. Om Saishwaraya vidmahe Satyadevaya dhimahi Tanna Sarva Prachodayat. Om Saishwaraya vidmahe Satyadevaya dhimahi Tanna Sarva Prachodayat. Om Sai Ram, and wishing everyone a wonderful, wonderful holy evening where we get to spend time with Swami through his gems. And he has a way of bringing a gem every week, sometimes multiple gems too, as it happened in a couple of sessions. And like always, it's always a wonderful experience for us at the background trying to get a speaker. It's as exciting and surprising as it can be, because at the start of the week we have no clue, but then he decides the speaker arrives, and here we go, probably on the 65th session since COVID started, where COVID has helped us to think of Sai Govind, as we call the series, the Govind series of satsangs with his gems. And I'm going to leave Sister Anupama to do the introduction of the gem, who is going to be our speaker today. Sai Ram.
Thank you, dear Venkatanna. And as our Venkatanna said, it is indeed a surprise every week, especially in this case, especially until last night, because he had such a perfect timing of arranging today's speaker that we were all amazed, really amazed. And you will know soon how perfect Swami's timing is. So at the very beginning, of course, as usual, I offer my very loving pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan and thank him for this lovely satsang that we are able to enjoy and we are blessed with every Sunday evening. And loving Sai Ram to one and all. I'm extremely glad to introduce the speaker for today's satsang, my batchmate, sister, and former neighbor at the Anantapur campus, Sister Sindhuja Karthik. Sindhuja came into Swami's fold in Nairobi, Kenya in September 94, when she happened to read a book that was lent to her by her neighbor when she had to research for an essay competition organized by the Sri Satya Sai Seva organization. The book happened to be Baba and I by John Hislop. And that became the most sought after book in her family, as all of them took turns to read it. And there was no looking back after that. The family then returned to India in 96. And that is when she had her first physical darshan of Swami at Puttaparthi. In 99, she joined the Sri Satya Sai Institute of High Learning, Anantapur campus, for the BSc program. She was blessed to be the gold medalist for the BSc Honours Chemistry stream. Thereafter, she did her B.Ed from the Bangalore University and MSc in Chemistry from Annamalai University. Since then, she has been in the teaching sector, having worked in different roles. She has also had the opportunity to be a part of the initial team that brainstormed ideas for the Sri Satya Sai Vidya Vahini program and served in this area for about 8 years in content preparation and teacher training. Currently, she is a principal of the Foundation School, a CBSE school in Bengaluru. Sister Sindhuja is an excellent singer, blessed with numerous opportunities to sing in Bhagwan's presence. On a personal note, Sindhuja, or Sindhu as we lovingly call her, to be honest, for me, she cannot be described in words. You have to be with her to know her energy, her dynamism, her authenticity. A bhajan singer with a soul-stirring voice, a clear-headed leader, an honest orator who could wake up even the over-the-fence backbenchers, a meticulous academic, and above all, a very authentic person with a beautiful heart. And that's a very rough sketch of Sindhuja for you. So that's how it is difficult for me to describe her in just a short introduction. Be it If there is only one thing I can clearly remember about this daughter of Sai, is her unwavering courage and commitment to values, especially during those times when we had to be united as a batch to overcome the obstacles in our path, leading to our master, Ariyar Swami. Be it during those relentless prayers to melt Swami's heart to give us our final year interview, or those music practice sessions, or those that memorable sports meet of our final year. Sindhuja's encouraging voice would regularly remind us of the very purpose we were there in that college, to be in Sai Sannidhi, and that everything else came next. She was that all-inclusive leader who made sure nobody was left behind, because that is what our beloved Lord has taught us. With this, I welcome this dear sister of mine to this platform today evening. Thank you for accepting to talk to us today, Sindhuja. Over to you.
Om Shri Sai Ram. My most loving pranams at Swami's lotus feet, and my deepest gratitude to him for having given me this opportunity today to be here, to hopefully share a few insights into the journey that is still going on in terms of figuring out what it means to be a Sai student. I think it will be a lifelong quest. And I think it is also safe to say, when I look back at the many years that have passed, everything seemed like a challenge at that point has actually prepared me for situations that I never knew were going to arise. Thank you, Anu, for such a wonderful and loving introduction. I don't know if I deserve every word that was spoken, but I think one of the greatest things that we as a batch benefited from was experiencing our unity in faith towards Swami. So keeping that in mind, I will now take this satsang forward. First, with a little insight into how this invite actually happened. So last evening, I got a frantic call from Anu, and I was in the middle of a meeting and I couldn't take her call. And I've always known Anu to be somebody very calm, very composed, someone who wouldn't, was never some sort of the assertive type. She would sort of allow things to flow, and she was incessantly calling me. And I even sent a message saying I'm in a meeting, but that didn't seem to deter her. So I was a little worried, also given the circumstances that we live in today, that maybe she needed my help with something. So I messaged her in the middle of the meeting asking, is everything okay? And then she said, I need a speaker for tomorrow. So my mind went into overdrive. Okay, let me try and source somebody for her, because I have a few connects amongst the alumni. Maybe I'll talk to somebody. And then she said, I was hoping you would speak. And the first reaction was, okay, I have nothing to say. The reply just wasn't coming out. And when Swami says, do my work, I have realized on more than one opportunity that if you think twice, you will miss the bus. And what you're then left with is this emptiness and regret that you weren't able to be there when he called upon you. So I just decided to say yes, without any idea as to what I'm going to speak today. And the fact that I had less than 24 hours to delve into past experiences that I had not thought about for many, many years. So I went and sat in front of my computer. First, I thought, I'd be very sort of organized with my preparation. Let me do a mind map of my experiences, try and figure out what I should speak. And then I realized I'm going nowhere. And then I closed my eyes. And the first line that we normally speak when we are invited, right? I offer myself at Bhagwan's lotus feet. That was the only thing that came, and then it stopped. And then the question arose. What does it mean when we say, I offer myself? It's become like a cliche almost, unfortunately. I offer myself. I kept thinking about that over and over and over again. And then Swami started, he said, take a pen, note down whatever it is that is coming to your mind at this moment as this question keeps resonating in your heart. So in the official introduction that sort of went out in the flyer today, as well as what Anu spoke about, she mentioned how that we came into this fold as a family in 1995. But interestingly, Swami had chosen that we would offer ourselves to him much earlier, and we didn't even know about it. So a little background about the members of my immediate family, just to understand how this entire thing has turned out over the years. My father, currently serving in Swami's Whitefield Hospital in patient administration, very fortunate to have been here since the project stages. So he's been with the hospital for almost 21 years. At the time before we came into Swami's fold, if I had to pick a few words to describe him, a man of immense self-belief, wherein nothing could shake his faith in a decision that he had taken because it resonated with his inner peace. And second, married to the truth at any cost. Nothing, no situation could ever shake him from that path. On the spiritual side, the way we look at spirituality, he was an agnostic bordering on atheism before Swami actually came into our lives as Satya Sai Baba. My mother was a complete study in contradictions when I look at my father and mother side by side. She was, is, will be always the Mirabai of our family. Blessed with a tremendous melodious voice. I mean, when Anu says that I'm a singer, I am nothing in comparison to how she sings. My mother, even today, can mesmerize an audience, not because of only the tonal quality, but because of the devotion that flows from the heart within. She has been connected to God in every form possible, through that music, through prayer, through Namasmarana, through an unwavering faith that everything that happens is God's will. So this too, even before Swami came into our lives as Bhagwan Baba. My sibling, my only sister, my older sister, Shailaja, whom Anu will recall very fondly. She's still in touch with her. A prolific writer, always loved to read. And two very simple words that describe her as a person: innocent, in the sense that nothing in this world, the negativity could never touch her. And second, always connected with a deep sense of contentment. So these were three very different personalities in the house. And then there was me. And I'm being brutally honest. From a purely worldly perspective, in terms of talents, many things came very easily to me right from the time I was a small child. From the time I was 4, I could sing, I could dance, I could speak in front of an audience. I think the first speech I gave was when I was 7 years old to an audience of about 350 people on national integration, a 5-minute speech. I didn't even know what those 2 words meant, but I spoke with a great deal of self-confidence. But those were talents. The other side is the qualities. Yes, I was often inclined to help around the house, also be helpful even when I was not asked. But I had 2 very strong personality traits that defined my journey with Swami in a very, very real way. One was a very deep-seated anger. I used to lose my temper quite easily, but more than that, a very, very strong sense of wrong and right and anger, right? And the second was obstinacy. If I believed that certain things had to happen in a certain way, that was it. And nothing could move me. This has got nothing to do with adherence to truth. It is plain and simple stubbornness, right? So giving this background, you will understand why I'm saying this when I start to share the experiences. I'm going to take us back to 1983. This was about 12 years before 1995 when Swami officially came into our lives. And it is very, very providential that what I'm about to narrate is a Singapore connection. My father was actually working in Singapore in the early 80s. And I was a toddler. I was an infant, actually, just a little over a year old. And my sister was about 4.5, 5. And for a vacation, as a family, we were traveling from Singapore to Bangkok by train. Longish journey, and everybody who's there in Singapore would know about the distance and then how much time it would have taken. And this, of course, for me, it's not a memory. It is more of the narration of the incident that my parents had done to me because I was too small to register any of this. And on this very pleasant journey, my father had struck up a friendship with a Chinese co-passenger who turned out to be a very good gentleman. They also went so far as to exchange phone numbers so that they could keep in touch. About halfway through the journey, the ticket collector on the train, who would come for his rounds to check the validity of tickets, happened to come to my father's bay to check and promptly told him that the ticket is insufficient to get us to Bangkok. And it would require a payment of an additional amount to get us there. Now, my father realized that he had purchased the correct ticket. There was nothing wrong with it. So he tried to put forward the fact that no, the ticket is correct and let it be rechecked. The collector maintained his ground, saying that you would have to pay an amount to continue on this journey, or otherwise you may not be allowed to do so. My father quickly realized that what he's being asked for is an additional monetary settlement, a sort of an arrangement to help this journey go to its completion. Now, remember what I had said about his adherence to truth and fearlessness. He had 2 small young daughters in hand, a young wife, luggage, foreigners in a country who didn't really know the language very well. And he took the decision to say, I will not pay an additional penny. Do what you will. The ticket collector stopped the train, pulled the chain, threw our bags out, threw us, the entire family, out on the middle of the tracks, in the middle of nowhere. And the train continued. We were stranded. We didn't know, there was no station either behind us or ahead of us nearby. So which meant a longish trudge on foot with luggage and children in the searing heat at that point in time. The journey was made, turned out to be an unpleasant memory that one would want to leave behind. And that's where we thought it ended. Until a few months later, when this Chinese gentleman suddenly calls up my father and out of the blue and said, I've been wanting to talk to you ever since that day. And only now I found the time. You have no idea how lucky your family was to be thrown off that train that day. My father was wondering, what is this man saying? Does he even know the kind of pain that we went through just to find the next station on foot? And he said, no. Later that night, dacoits attacked the train, attacked only the coach that we were seated in, looted every single passenger of every single belonging that they had, all the money, all the precious belongings that they had, in exchange for a promise that they would not harm them physically. You and your family were saved that afternoon. One doesn't understand the depth of what just happened. This is not at a time when we even knew that Satya Sai Baba is somebody who would be coming into our lives. My mother, as I said, was very devout and a very good singer. In the same building where we stayed in Singapore, 2 floors above us, there was an ardent devotee of Swami who used to have bhajans every week. So my mother used to go sing bhajans there and come, not so much because she was a devotee, but because her voice was so sublime that people wanted to hear it. But that's about it. She was never allowed to bring a photograph of Swami into the house because godmen were looked down upon in the house, right? So that was where we were. Fast forward to about 17, 18 years after this incident, I had a dream where Swami it was a very strange sort of setting, and Swami is actually sitting with a laptop and he's looking at something on it. And I asked Swami, what is that? He's saying, checking accounts. He said, what? I said, what do you mean, Swami, checking? Checking to see how many times I have taken care of you. And he said, train ride, Singapore. Who do you think saved you? Right? So the connection started way back. Coming to 1995 and how the journey actually began as devotees. As mentioned in the bio that was shared, my sister and I were studying in a school in Nairobi, and there was this essay competition. We both were good at English. I mean, it was sort of a thing that was passed down through the generations. There was an essay competition and a poetry competition. So she decided that she'd go for the poetry bit, and I wanted to write an essay. And this entire thing was organized by this place called the Satya Sai organization, and it was about human values. I said, okay, all this is very new. I know the English bit of it. I don't know what I'm supposed to write about human values. I happened to know that there was a neighbor of ours who were devotees. I mean, they had mentioned that they were devotees of Satya Sai Baba. So I had this thought, you know, I want to win this competition. So I'm going to go to the source. I'm going to find out what this Sai Baba actually says about human values and write all his words in this essay, and then I'll win, right? So I went and borrowed the book. I went to her house and I said, I'd like a book which, you know, will give me some ideas about who Sai Baba is and what he does for, you know, people. I can write something from there. So Auntie looked at me and she said, okay, I'll give you a book which will be easy for you to understand. So this is My Baba and I by John Hislop. So take it, read it, and I hope you enjoy it. And when you're done with it, you return it to me. I said, okay. Went home, I religiously read it like I was preparing for an exam, found some pages, some passages which seemed to resonate with what I wanted to put down on the paper, wrote it, and left the book on the table and forgot to return it to her. And the next thing I know, my sisters picked it up and read it because she's an avid reader. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it is the newspaper or a pamphlet or a 1,000-page novel, she will read it, right? And she will finish whatever size of the book, she'll finish it in 24 hours or less. So she finished reading it and it seemed to have struck a very deep chord, and she passed it on to my mother. My mother already knew of Swami because she used to go for bhajans much earlier in Singapore. So it didn't take her much to have to read it and then sort of fall in love with the entire thing. And then it was sort of passed on to my father. A little bit of trepidation there because we don't know exactly how he's going to react to a book about a living God who is apparently talking about many spiritual aspects that one is probably not ready to listen about. But when the time is right, the time is right. Nobody needed to say anything. The book spoke for itself. And before we knew, a curiosity had been ignited. So from there, we actually graduated to going to the Samiti, finding more books. The next book that was read by my parents especially was The Holy Man and the Psychiatrist. And that pretty much sealed the deal for them that Swami is everything, pretty much everything that this life is about. And without him, nothing makes sense anymore. But I had a very, very strange, different type of experience from that point. I didn't win any prize in the essay competition. And I was saying, this all-knowing God who's so powerful, I've written so many things from his own book. Why have I not been selected? Right? And I'm so used to doing things so well and winning at everything that this was a bit of a damn squib. So there was a little bit of reserved acceptance of this new God figure in the house. Yes, because you are brought up with a certain value system. You do your prayers, you light the lamp, you sing bhajans, you do all of it. But like I said, I had that innate stubbornness, a little bit of a rebellious streak within, which wanted to question everything before accepting it. Around 1996, when it was time for almost my 10th grade to begin, we had to shift back to Bangalore. It was a very strange time to shift. Normally, parents don't like to move their children on during these cusp years, right? Because moving from a different system, different board, language, everything becomes a problem. But we decided to make the shift because the time felt right. I entered grade 10. Everything was a breeze, an absolute. I mean, it was like I didn't even have to make a move from a different system to another. It just sort of took off. Academically, everything was brilliant. Everything was happening as it was supposed to, as far as I was concerned. I did very well. End of 10th grade, I had lots of reasons to celebrate. And still, Swami was sort of somebody in the background, right? Everybody in the house adored him, but I really didn't connect with him as a guru, guide, God, none of those things. It was more somebody who was a feel-good factor for me. 97 to 99 were the turning points in my life because I was about to be hit by something which I was not prepared for. I got into a school for my 11th grade on a recommendation by the founder of the school in the 10th standard where I had studied. He owned both schools, where I was going to go for the 11th and where I had studied my 10th. And on his recommendation, I was given a seat in the other school in the 11th standard. This didn't go down very well with the teachers of the new school because they felt I had gotten in without my merit being tested. So what began was a pointed sort of attempt to put me down in every single class, to systematically destroy my confidence. They wouldn't help. Even if I had doubts, they wouldn't answer my questions. And for the first time in my life, I actually failed exam after exam, test after test. And they wanted to get to a point where I would have, I would have enough reason on my own to leave the school. And I remember at a point toward the end of the 11th grade, it was do or die, right? If I didn't cross that exam, I'd fail 11th standard. Nobody's going to promote me to 12th. And I was like, a year ago, I was topping in subjects in the board exam in grade 10. And here I am, sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel. I have no idea what's going on. And it was a very, very difficult time emotionally, mentally. And very often I was also picked on, insulted in class. And I still remember what my father told me one day. He sat me down and he said, so people say all these things about you. Are they true? I said, no, it's not true, but it's hurtful. He said, answer my question. Are they true? He said, no. I said, no, it's not true. Then why are you letting it get to you? Where is your sense of self-belief, self-confidence? Why can't you dig within, deep within, and believe that you can do this? All you need is faith. It seems so simple, but it wasn't. It is very far cry from what I was feeling at that time. So I sort of trudged through 12th standard, finally managed to get a pretty decent score in the board exams. And by the end of that, I still remember the last examination was math. After the exam, I came home. I think my mother would still remember the scene. I put the books to one corner. I jumped about 6 feet in the air, landed on my, how you prostrate to the, elders in your family. And I said, I'm done with science, mathematics, everything. And for the rest of my life, I'm done with schooling. I am not going to study anymore. Right. So those 2 years had led me to a point where I believed that I do not want anything to do with education anymore. And that's just leave me alone. Right? Around this time, my sister had also, she was finishing up her degree in a college in Bangalore. And my parents, in their deep sense of prayer, wanted both my sister and I to get a seat in Swami's Anantapur College, and decided to actively look at applying there. I was adamant. I said, you please apply for her. I am not studying anymore. I will be 12th grade pass. And my father said, spiritually speaking, I have no problem with it. You don't need an educational qualification to be approved in the eyes of God. But in the material world, you need a degree to amount to something, right? So in order for you to stand on your own 2 feet so that you don't end up in a situation where somebody has to support you for the rest of your life, you need to have a degree. So I am going to apply to this college, whether you like it or not. So there was a tussle that kept going back and forth. Then I finally said, you know what? I will do this on the condition that I need not pursue math or physics after this point. I'll do home science. My father says, what is this home science? I said, see, I'm very good at cooking, right? So home science teaches about stitching, cooking, all that. I had very limited knowledge about what home science actually is. It is a very structured course that teaches much beyond cooking, right? But for me at that point, with my adamant views about life, I said, I will excel at cooking. So you put me in that course, and that's about it. So we're reaching a point of exasperation. They said, you know what, we'll go with it. We'll apply for, home science. And interestingly, in the application, it said, in order to apply for home science, you need a background in biology. Now, I had dropped biology after grade 10. I had pursued computer science. So I wasn't qualified to apply. So I said, see, very good, course cannot be taken because I don't qualify. So my father said, no worries. We will write a letter along with this application asking for a special case, thing, where if you do well in the entrance for the MPC course, would they still look at offering you a seat in home science? So a couple of weeks later, we got the callback letter from the university, or Sathya Sai University, saying that both of us were given a hall ticket for the entrance examination. And there was, interestingly, a little postcard that came with the Sathya Sai, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, the entire gamut of all that, their letterhead, everything, right? Which said that as a special case, we will consider your daughter, Sindhuja, for the course of home science, if she does well in the MPC entrance, though she does not have a background in biology. I was very happy. All set, I'm getting my way again. Let's see what happens. But internally, I still had other plans. I know how there are many alumni who would probably share about how they did tapas and, did so many prayers to get into Swami's college. I was doing the opposite. I said, I will systematically ensure I don't get in there, right? Because I don't want to go to some ashram where, I'll have to share a room with some 7-8 people. God alone knows I'll have to wash my own clothes. I'll have to adjust. I'll have to eat food which may or may not be palatable. I don't know if my parents will be allowed to speak to me, meet me. I mean, why would I leave the comfort of home, go somewhere to Andhra Pradesh where there is searing heat to study a course that I don't even want to pursue, right? So this was very logical in my mind. I said the best way not to get selected is to not study, right? If I tank the entrance exam, I will not get a seat. So all is well, right? So I spent the whole of April lounging around the house. I had put my books, sealed them away in a corner, and that was the end of it. My sister was poring over her literature books, psychology, this, that, studying everything, for her MA entrance, because at any cost, she wanted to be ready to get into Swami's college. I said, God bless you. I will also pray that you get a seat, but I am not going to study, right? Then one day in April, towards the end of April, my sister sat down next to me and she said, Sindhu, why are you being so stubborn? Why can't I said, I don't want to go there. She said, it's not a question of your wanting. What if Swami wants you there? I said, if Swami wants me there, let him come and tell me. I'm through, going after somebody, asking him, do you want me there and all of that. If he wants me there, let him come and tell me. Don't bug me. You go study. I promise I'll pray for you, but you don't ask me anything else. And she was near to tears. And this was her personality, right? She was more worried that I should get a seat than the fact that whether she would get a seat or not. That night, I had a dream that I will never forget for the rest of this lifetime for sure. And probably if Swami wills that I have to have another birth, I will remember the dream even in the next birth. It was, the setting was in our house. And I'm sitting in the middle of the hall. It's a sort of an almost twilight time, not very well lit. The lamps are not yet on, the light isn't on. And I suddenly see Swami standing in front of me. And he asked me, why aren't you studying? I said, I don't want to study. What if I want you to study? I said, why should I study? What am I going to get from it? And then suddenly, without warning, Swami's entire face was one which was filled with anger. It is a visage that I had never seen in any photograph, and I had not had that much proximity with the physical form to have really experienced anything before that point. Anger, it actually turned red, and his eyes were blazing. I could actually see like embers from his eyes. And Swami waved his hand and materialized a thick gold chain. And he said, "Do you want this?" I said, "If you want to give it to me, I'll take it." He said, "Do you want it? I am willing to give you this and much more, only if you understand the value of it. All I'm asking you to do is study. Look at your sister, learn from her. That is devotion. If you are willing to take one step, I will do anything that is required to make sure this comes to you." And then the dream ended. I got up from my bed. My entire dress, the bedclothes, everything was drenched in perspiration. I still remember. I'm actually sweating as I speak now. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what had hit me. I got up, I washed my face, I drank a sip of water, I sat down. It took me a long while to settle myself. I went back to sleep. 5:30, I got up, had a shower, pulled out my books and started studying. And I had less than a week to study what would have taken me more than a month to master. I couldn't understand a word of what was in the books. I couldn't remember anything I had done in my 12th standard because it had been such a long gap. And it's only now in our current education system that at least teachers are teaching towards learning for understanding and helping you to figure out why you're studying what you're studying. When we used to study, it used to be just memorize, throw it out in the question answer paper, and then you're done, right? So I couldn't remember anything. And I was, even in that, there was that feeling of ego. Can I reach out to Swami for help at a time like this when I have not done what I was expected to do? That is also ego. To feel that I cannot ask him for help is also showing the fact that I feel I am in control. Any which way I went about it, I studied what I thought I could remember, went for the entrance exam. The English paper went very well because it was mostly creative writing, and the creative vein has never been an issue. But when it came to the science paper, not a single question made sense. I didn't know what the paper was asking. I looked at it from every angle possible. Thankfully, it was a multiple choice paper. So I said, okay, there is some chance. There is a possibility that something may work here. I said, okay, I am just going to say Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram, and keep picking whatever I feel like, and then pray with all my might that something happens for the better. I finished it, came out of the exam hall. I think Anu would remember this bit where we were all seated on the lawns outside the examination area, waiting for the results to be declared. And they told us at 4:30 that evening, the results will be put up on there is a bulletin board there, go and check whether your names are there. Everybody went to, the canteen or this thing for ashram, had their food and came. I refused to get up from my space that I had found for myself on the lawn, saying, I will not get up from here till I find out whether I have passed or not. My father pleaded with me. He said, get up and come, let's eat, drink something. You can't just sit here in the sun the entire day. I said, no, I will not move till I know what the result is. If I have failed and I have not made it, then at least I know I'll go back home and never show my face here again. So he took my sister, they went for their food. He brought something back for me. I ate sitting there. At 4:30, the crowd started gathering around the bulletin board. I couldn't bring myself to go and check. After a bit, I went there and I desperately, through all the craning heads that were looking for something to find out if their names were there. I kept searching at the bottom of the list because if anything, that is where my name should be, if at all, right? So I looked at the bottom half of the list. They had, sort of arranged the results, the names in the order of the results from the top scorer to the least, and the people who had sort of made it through the mark that was expected. So I kept searching at the bottom half. And then one of the girls who I had befriended at that point, she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, your name is Sindhuja, right? I said, yes. Your name is there, you didn't see. I said, where is it there? I've been searching for the last 20 minutes. She said, it's at the top of the list. I said, are you sure? She said, look, go closer and look. And to my utter astonishment and befuddlement, there was my name in the top 5 scorers. And this was immediate, right? The reaction, dal mein kuch kala hai, because this could not have happened. Some higher power has taken over the scores and done the needful. And I have no credit to take in any of this. The next day was the interview process. They asked me, they ask you general questions to see whether you would be adaptable to a hostel life of this kind. And in my enthusiasm, eagerness, yes, I can adjust. I'm very good. I'm very happy to be in this situation. Just 2 weeks earlier, I had said, I would have to be dragged by my collar to get into an ashram setting. And here I was in no uncertain terms saying, I'm very adaptable. I can adjust. I have no problem. I'll take care of everything. Anything to get a seat and get in there, right? They said, very good, fine. We will get back to you if you get the seat. A week later, both of us got our letters confirming the admission into Anantapur, but the drama hadn't stopped as yet. My sister got her seat into the MA course, as that is what she had applied for. I got a letter saying that I had been selected for the MPC course. Now, again, there is a dilemma. I didn't want to study MPC. I wanted to do home science. And I had a letter from the university stating clearly, if I did well in MPC entrance, they will give me a home science seat. I said, what is happening? Yes, I want to go there, but maths, physics, I cannot study these things anymore because, those 2 years in 11th and 12th, my confidence had been destroyed in these subjects and I didn't want to go to it again. Around that time, we happened to find the contact of one of the alumni girls who had recently completed her course. And she very graciously agreed to talk to my sister and me about hostel life, what we would have to look out for and all of that. And I took these letters along and I also told her, I said, I've got this thing which says, home science course, but they've given me a seat for MPC. What should I do? So then she said, you're in luck. May month, generally, because Swami is in Vrindavan. At that point in time, right? The warden and the principal of the Anantapur campus, Jayama madam, she is in the quarters in the Vrindavan area. So I know her very well. I had studied directly under her. So if you want, I will take you there to meet her tomorrow and you can ask her directly and she will clarify. She can even get in touch with the university if required to get the seat, the course changed. I said, okay, stroke of luck, let me go. So next day I went with this Akka and we have got an audience with Jayama madam. She looked long and hard at that postcard and she said, who gave this to you? I said, it came to me from the university. She said, the university is not permitted to send such letters out promising students a course that they are not equipped to handle. If you don't have a background in biology, there is no way, we don't even have a letterhead like this, which could, be sent out to anybody with this kind of information. I'm not sure this is an authentic letter. And then it hit me. Bhagwan Baba had gone to the extent of tricking me into taking the entrance exam by promising me something I had asked for so that he would end up giving me what was meant for me, right? And then she told me, I still remember this. She said, millions await a single seat. You have been given not one, but 2 opportunities to take up a course that you wanted and then to get a seat in a course you didn't want, but at least the seat is yours. You have time till the 31st to take a decision. If you decide not to come to the campus, your seat will pass on to the next deserving candidate. Think carefully before you take the next step. 2 weeks of inner turmoil, the dream kept running in my head. And then finally, I took the plunge. On the 30th, I packed everything that I needed. And on the 31st, my sister and I reported to Anantapur campus. So it was a very different kind of an entry into Swami's college. And what I thought was going to be the end of all trials and the beginning of 3 years of bliss, little did I realize what lay ahead. Within the first 2 weeks of my joining, the first thing I had realized is, okay, I am going to be the model student. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to get marks in everything. And, I'm never going to invite a dream of that kind ever again. And because I'm also given an opportunity where I can sing, I will ensure that I try out for music. My sister's also there. Both of us will try and we will get into that. So I basically created a 5-year plan without asking Swami anything about it. Right? And within 2 weeks of having joined, I think around the 14th or 15th of June, 1999, I was getting ready to leave for college. I was in the hostel corridor when suddenly there was this excruciating pain and I just crumpled up and fell on the floor. And I had to be rushed in an emergency to the nearby hospital in Anantapur. There were not very good facilities at that point in time. And for a long time, they weren't able to figure out. Then they finally did some tests, exams, and they said it looks like appendicitis. So my parents were called. Overnight, they came rushing. Swami, in his own, benevolence, ensured that one of the teachers, she volunteered. They were more like mothers to us, all our teachers, professors in the college. She stayed with me the entire night till my parents came. And then we had this long journey back to Bangalore by car where, and then I had to undergo the surgery and then the period of convalescence. I missed a good 3 weeks of college, just 2 weeks after having joined. And by the time I returned, it was almost time for the mid-semester exams. And here I was greatly saying, I will study, I will be model student. And then I didn't even know what was going on when I returned to class. So that was the second time I was knocked squarely on the head saying, you are not the doer. You have to let the doer, let his will prevail. So I had no choice in the matter, right? I had to pray because I couldn't understand a word of what had been covered in the college syllabus. And I had a mid-semester exam and I said, okay, I will try, I will attempt. And astonishingly, we had this CGPA system that used to be used and a grade point average, right? And the five points was the golden quotient basically that people had to look to achieve. Magically enough, I got 5 points in every single area. Wondering, okay, apparently I don't have to study to get this. I didn't study, I got through the entrance exam. I fell sick, I didn't study, I prayed, I got 5 points. This looks like a pretty good deal. I'll just keep doing this. So on the other hand, on the non-academic side was the bhajan opportunity to sing in front of Bhagwan. The little ego that was inside me wanted to show its presence, right? Every now and then, how can it go away so easily? So I was very perturbed by the fact that we are expected to sing in pairs. See, in my case, I actually should have been very happy because my singing partner was my sister, right? And our styles matched perfectly. We didn't have to think twice. Like when we would open our mouths, the same thing would come out, whether we'd spoken to each other or not, right? So ideal setting, I should have been happy, but still that little feeling, right? I want to sing alone in front of Swami. I want my voice to be heard. And as luck would have it, when we were selected for the bhajan group and the music group and everything, and we were obviously paired up, my sister has a very mellifluous, soft toned voice. And I have a slight, as you can make out from my speaking voice, slightly louder, slightly gruffer tone, right? So when we would sing together, it would blend, but my voice was a little louder. And the teacher would keep saying, move back a little from the mic. You're drowning her voice out. So this was a further this thing up front. First of all, I wanted to sing alone. And secondly, you're asking me to move back so that my voice is not heard that well. So all of this was very new territory for me. And then came the first opportunity in Global Akhand Bhajan, 99 November. Very, very, very fortunate to have been amongst the first few chosen pairs to sing in front of Swami on the very first evening. And this was it was indeed a surprise because I was still in my first year. There were a fair number of my seniors who had been singing for a long time, who would be getting a chance only later. So I was very thrilled. I was very happy. And we were sitting in the mandir and we used to have this very little, very nice time just before the starting of Akhand Bhajan. Swami would come into the mandir and he would walk on that carpet between the ladies and the gents side, talking to the students, the teachers, and just looking to see if the arrangements are in place. So that was going to be the first opportunity to see him up close, physically. And because every time before that, it was not as a student, darshan, some orange speck in the distance, right? So this was the first time we would get to see him close up. And the first thing he did was, when he came in front, my sister and I were sitting in the third row, and our bhajan in charge teacher was sitting in the front, and Swami came to her and said, "Is it?" And in Telugu, I'm not, my Telugu is quite bad, so I'll give the translation in English. Swami said, "Is everything ready? Girls are singing in pairs, no? Always have to sing in pairs. Only then, no ego." And I heard it loud and clear. I'm like, okay, message received. And Swami said, sing simple bhajans, sing with feeling, and think only about Swami when you are singing. And Swami said one more thing. During bhajan, I will be sitting on the simhasan. Look at me and sing. Don't close your eyes. Who are you searching for? I am sitting in front of you. Look at me and sing. And this was again a lesson to us, because, you know, especially when you're in the girls' campus, Swami was very particular about the way girls should conduct themselves. He would say that your focus should always be on the floor only when you're walking. Until I come, you should not look up, right? So this was like a direction from him. You can look at me and sing, because in the mandir, the seating was such that Swami's simhasan would be on the boys' side. So whether we are even allowed to look that side was a doubt that used to be there in our mind, right? So he said, look straight at me and sing. So our very first bhajan, which my sister and I had an opportunity to sing, was Sri Ramachandra. Just to give a little bit of a relief in the continuous narrative that I've been going on with, I will share that bhajan. I will just sing. And please bear with me. My voice isn't in very good condition today, but I will sing each line once just to share the first bhajan that we had an opportunity to sing in front of Swami. Shri Ramachandra, Jaya Ramachandra, Shri Ramachandra, Jaya Ramachandra, Raghuveera Ranadheera Raghukula Rama, Raghuveera Ranadheera Raghukula Rama, Shri Ramachandra, Jaya Ramachandra, Dasharatha Nandana Dayabhirama, Danava Bhanjana Kodanda Rama, Kalyana Rama, Kamaniya Rama, Kalyana Rama, Kamaniya Rama, Raghuveera Ranadheera Raghukula Rama, Raghuveera Ranadheera Shri Sai Rama, Shri Ramachandra, Jaya Ramachandra. Even today, I can remember how we felt when we sang in front of Swami for the first time. Both of us, my sister and I, were holding our hands at the time we were singing, that we shouldn't forget a single line. We shouldn't sing something wrong. And it was a sublime, very sublime experience. Nothing words cannot actually express. So it was a beautiful feeling to have had that opportunity. And after this was over, the first year, of course, continued. Academically, things continued to be a 5-point CGPA. There wasn't many more sort of hiccups in the journey for the rest of the first year. We came back home for our summer vacation. At the beginning of the second year, we got this happy news that Swami is going to revive the summer course. Oh, the joy, the thrill of it. See Anu's face, the smile on it, just the memory of the fact that, we were going to be chosen to spend 2 lovely weeks with Swami in a setting that very few have had the opportunity over the years. We were over the moon, right? We had only heard stories. We'd read summer showers in Vrindavan, but we had not really experienced it firsthand. And so we were very excited. So we went. 2 weeks of absolute emotional, spiritual, physical. The reason I'm saying physical bliss is food. Nobody would believe the variety of foods. It was like at the end of it, we were, food was coming out of our noses and ears and everything possible, because Swami just wanted to stuff us with his love. Mangoes galore, right? The hostel that we were put up in, it was like a mango perfumery, right? And it was quite amazing. The food aspect of it, nobody missed home for those 2 weeks. And if anything, we wanted to just continue staying there and eating all the time. Then there was the Fill for the Soul, right? Where Swami would give a discourse every evening about a running theme. So that was Ram Katha is what he had taken up, and he would keep giving us these beautiful jewels about himself as Rama in that avatar. And then in the morning, there was, things for more for intellectual inspiration, where our professors, teachers, people who are stalwarts in Swami's fold, who would give us talks in the Institute Auditorium in Vrindavan. And in the morning talks, there was this opportunity every single day for one chosen student to give a speech. And generally, it is a final year student or a postgraduate, or somebody who's been there for a very long time who would get an opportunity. So one fine day, I was called by one of the teachers, and she said, "We have chosen you to give a speech in the morning, one of the morning sessions." I said, "Okay, very good. I will speak." Always ready, right? What is, I mean, it comes so naturally. All I have to do is speak. And here at this point in time, I had no experiences to share also. It was just my own imaginings of my journey with Swami and how good I was at everything. That is all I had. There was not much of a resume to share with a larger audience. And so she said, "You have, after 3 days is your turn, sit and prepare, and tomorrow I want to hear the speech." So I diligently prepared. Swami did guide the process, I must say. I didn't have much substance at that point, but he reminded me of a lot of childhood experiences which I could connect with Swami's teachings. And it sort of wove itself into a very good narrative. For about 20 minutes, 25 minutes would have been the extent of the script. And on the day that I was supposed to give the speech, and this was unheard of, right? A second year student giving a speech in front of everybody in the auditorium. So they had a special thing which they told me about only that morning, that the student who's chosen to speak will get an opportunity to sit somewhere in the front in the darshan hall so that Swami can bless you, and then you can go and give your speech. So I dressed up very nicely. I wanted to have a pleasing visage for Swami. I went and sat there, and I was very, very happy to have had the opportunity. I went and sat there, and Swami came straight to where I was sitting. And he said, "What?" I said, "Swami, I'm going to give a speech today." Swami looked perplexed. "What?" I said, "Swami, I'm going to give a speech today in the auditorium." "You? Speech? Today?" He went off. What kind of a strange blessing is this? Right? First of all, he's doubting the fact that my name is on the schedule. And then he didn't bless me. He just shook his head and went off. I said, "This is not a very good beginning. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth when I go there, so I better be careful." So anyway, we had our breakfast, everything, and we went to the auditorium, and they had this thing where they would have a little blackboard outside the Institute auditorium where the names of the speakers for that day would be written. And interestingly, my name was not there. And some of the students' name was there. Till that morning, I had been told I would be speaking. And then now suddenly my name is not on the list. So Swami knew I was not going to give the speech, which is why he didn't feel the need to give me any blessing that day. And he shook his head, because you are under a misconception that you're going to speak today. It's not your turn. So obviously I was deflated immediately. And I gave up any hope of getting an opportunity and just sat quietly. A week later, I was sitting in the darshan hall as usual, this morning session before we would go for the auditorium session. And a teacher came running to me and she said, "Swami is 3 minutes away. Get up, go change your sari and come." I said, "For what? You're speaking today." I said, "I don't remember my speech. I don't remember anything that I wrote." She said, "Doesn't matter. And you're not allowed a script also. Just go change and come." I ran blindly. I didn't know what I did. It was the longest and shortest 3 minutes of my life. And I came running back to the auditorium, to the Darshan hall, and sat there just as the music began. And Swami came again straight to me and said, speech, huh? Even before I could say anything. And for the first time, I had nothing to say. I just did this. And I bowed my head. From a distance, Swami did Abhyasta and he went. It didn't end there. I went to the auditorium. I saw the list of speakers for the day. I was the third speaker. The speaker just before me was Jaima Madam. For anybody who has had an experience of being an audience at one of her speeches, she's a prolific speaker with a wealth of experiences. A blessing to have been so close to Swami as to almost be called a family member. And that day, she gave a speech that was so soul-stirring. Even now, when I recall it, tears well up. The entire auditorium was weeping. We actually could not be. We were passing around handkerchiefs and tissues because we just needed to calm ourselves. It was not her. Swami had spoken every possible thing through her mouth that day, and we could not, we were unprepared for that overwhelming experience. Thunderous applause. She got a standing ovation, and then somebody tapped me and said, it's your turn now. I said, okay, can I not speak? Because this is like, you know, a tail ender trying to follow up Sachin Tendulkar after he has hit 150 runs and, you know, and then he is ready to get out in the next ball kind of thing. So again, no script, hands perspiring, tear-streaked face. They gave me a rose to go and offer it to Swami on, you know, Swami's chair. I went, put it, looked up at the chair and said, Swami, I remember nothing. Went and stood at the podium. Pin drop silence, and everybody is wondering, what is this girl going to say, which will make this all right, that she's even here on the stage. I blanked out completely. I didn't know what to, I didn't even remember what I had prepared. And then I, again, while I was standing there, I turned and looked at Swami's chair and said, Swami, please speak. Nothing is coming out of my mouth. Swami, please speak. I don't remember a single word I spoke that day, but I spoke for 1 hour. I sang 2 songs, and that's all I remember. An hour later, I got a standing ovation, and that's all I remember. And then it struck me. It needed a hammering and an emptying of what was within for Swami to be willing to fill my being. Unfortunately, as a human being, we have a tendency to keep lapsing. As beautiful as these experiences are, we have a very short memory when it comes to the most important things in life. And the ego within doesn't easily go away. It keeps rearing its head. So the rest of the year carried on. There were many other experiences that happened. I'm sort of picking and choosing a few which highlight this journey that I started off with from the dream of the, you know, where Swami had materialized the gold chain. I'm sort of keeping that theme going. If I had to sort of give a title to this satsang, it would be the journey from the egotist to the blessed daughter of Swami, right? So in keeping in line with that thought process, in 2001 March, so we had this, every batch would have a prayer that they should get an interview from Swami before they would leave the portals of the institution. 2001 March was the sort of the culmination of the course that my sister was studying. She was finishing her second year MA, and her postgraduate batch and the corresponding undergraduate batch, wonderful batch of seniors, I must say, who taught us a lot about being connected with Swami. And they too had this prayer to be blessed with an interview. And I had this new relationship with Swami after many of these experiences that I should now start talking to Swami directly whenever I feel like I deserve something or I want something. So I told Swami, please give, my sister's name is Shailaja. I call her Shailu. Shailu's batch and interview Swami. It would be very nice if we could also get an opportunity along with them, because I want to see what you're going to tell them. Right? So this was my inner prayer. Didn't share it with anybody else. We had all gone to Puttaparthi, the Shivratri that time, and then Swami mentioned, next week I will give interview for outgoing batch, but bring everybody. He just said, bring everybody. This was very strange, because normally Swami would say, bring the outgoing batch and I will give them interview. So we were like, okay, at least we get to be in the sort of vicinity. Maybe something will happen. The following week, we had reached there, and then Swami came and said, interview is there this afternoon. All batches will come for the interview. So that little desire had been satisfied. When we went for the interview, they had prepared songs, they had composed songs, all of that was sung, offered, all very good. But there was something about to happen which none of us was prepared for. Swami suddenly asked, and this is a very strange thing. He looked at Jaima Madam and he said, who has got 5 points consistently all through in this outgoing batch? Make them stand up. So one was one of the girls from the BA final year course, and the other was my sister from the MA course. So both of them stood up. So 2 girls standing in the mandir in front of Swami. My heart started beating rapidly. Flesh and blood being recognized by Swami, right? Maybe I will also get something, right? Please understand, underlying desire is to be noticed. It is not only about sister getting a blessing. That I'm overjoyed about that, no doubt. But there is that little feeling, right? So Swami spoke to both of them. And then he made the girl who was in the final year BA, he asked her to sit. And then he pointed to my sister and he said, come. She didn't know what struck her, right? She was just standing there, like, and everybody from the back pushing her, go, Swami's calling you, go. And by the time she went there, she was looking down and walking because she had to make her way through the crowd. The rest of us were gasping because Swami was materializing something. She didn't know that Swami was materializing anything. By the time she reached there, Swami had materialized a diamond watch. And he held it out to her. Remember what I had said about my sister's innocence. A girl student, normally we're all trained, right? If Swami gives you something, you put your hand out like this. She stuck her wrist out so that Swami would have to tie it. Like a little child, right? Going up to her mother and saying, tie it for me. Swami actually tied that watch around her wrist. And she was shivering. And for a moment, Swami looked out of the corner of his eye at me and gave me that same glaring look which had happened in the dream. And I just shrunk into myself. This moment was hers. It had nothing to do with me. It was that soul's deservedness to be in close proximity with its master. And I had no role to play in this. I had to recede to the background. I had to learn not to keep projecting myself and my desire all the time to the forefront. And then it struck me. I am blessed to be related to a soul who has just been blessed by Bhagwan. And at the conclusion of that interview, the only thing I could feel was, if only I can realize what Swami had said in the dream, learn from your sister, be more like her. He wanted that humility, he wanted that simplicity, he wanted that purity to trickle into me so that I could also be deserving of the grace that he wanted to give me. So it was a lesson yet again to recede to the background and only act when called upon. Do not act voluntarily. Wait to be called upon before you do anything. The third year started. That was the first time I would be at Anandpur without my sister's company because she had finished her course. And again, the focus had now shifted to academics, and plus the final year, we were given additional responsibilities as captains. There were many other things that we were looking into. And it was essential that we focused and did well in the area that we had chosen. Now, there was a small little thing that had happened here. In February 2001, we were asked to choose our major, physics, chemistry, or math. So by this time, I had sort of started understanding that I should stop writing my own future and I should not think. So I spoke to my mother and I said, I'm very much in a dilemma. I said, see, maths, I think is not my cup of tea because I like the practical aspect of science. But having said that, let me not even have those desires. I said, Ma, if you can write in 3 chits, math, physics, chemistry, and put it in front of Swami and let me know what comes back. Because I didn't trust myself to do this in an honest way. I would probably find a shortcut and call it my, his decision after that. So I got a message from my mother the very next day saying, on the chit that said chemistry, Kumkum has materialized. So that should be your major. And this was a very strange thing because finally in our batch, only 2 of us chose chemistry. So it was like tuition, right? We had all the possible benefits of an excellent education in our final year of college with just 2 of us in the class, right? And other teachers were saying, why don't you be in a larger setting like a physics or a math where there can be more competition and you'll push yourself. I said, you know what, Swami said chemistry, I will take chemistry. It's okay, right? And there is this, I'm not sure if people are aware, there is this inter-campus rivalry also that goes on for the gold medal, right? Especially for these disciplines where the course is sort of common amongst campuses, right? Across campuses. So we had got wind of the fact there was only 2 students in the running for the chemistry gold medal. This was somewhere in the middle of the year we got to know. 1 student from the Brindavan campus and the other was me. And both of us were tied till that point. And in the month of August, in my final year, I was struck with a very, very severe case of jaundice. So bad that I could not get out of the bed and I needed to be taken back home so that it would, they weren't able to take care of it in the hostel. So they said, it's better that you go back. So just a month before the end semester exams, again, disaster struck and I had to go back home. I came back a week before the exam and I had to catch up on a month's honors course portion in 4 subjects. I had my teachers come to the hostel and take special classes for me to help me catch up. I still remember, I had the same experience all over again. Went to the examination hall, couldn't understand anything. And this time it was not multiple choice. I had to write something to submit the paper. Wrote whatever came to my mind. I think I also wrote some poetry in one of those papers because I couldn't remember any of the chemistry that I had studied. And waited. And finally it turned out for the first time, I missed my 5-point CGPA because in one paper, I had slipped by about 4 or 5 points, which itself was a miracle. If anything, I should have got only 4 or 5 points out of 100, but I had missed 4 or 5 points. But anyway, it meant that it was now hanging in the balance because the CGPA had gone and the possibility of getting the gold medal had sort of started slipping away. It was rankling at the back of my mind because I was like, have I failed the test that Swami gave me? Because he said I assumed that gold chain that he had materialized and talked about with regard to my studies in the dream was the gold medal, right? So I said, okay, maybe I missed the bus. November of that year, November 2001, Ladies' Day. We had an amazing opportunity to present a music program in front of Bhagwan. We had some tremendously gifted singers from our seniors, our own batch, and as well as our juniors who had joined us that year in first year. So there were 5 of us seated in the front, 2 first-year students. My bhajan partner in the final year was a different student since my sister had left. Myself, and there was a senior one, Akka, who was there. And we were singing. And for those of us who remember, Ladies' Day was the time when Swami used to distribute saris to all the VIPs who were sitting in the veranda area. Right? So normally during the music program or bhajan session, he would start the distribution. So this was no different. When the girls' program was going on, he started distributing the saris. And by the time he had finished with the veranda, bhajan started. I was sitting in the front. Swami came and stood in front of me. And, bhajan time, there is this ganjira, tabla, talam, everybody's furiously playing, and, everyone's giving it their all because they want to be heard by Swami. There was just so much of sound all around that I couldn't hear what Swami was saying. He has a very soft voice. Okay? So I had to strain. I couldn't get up. And Swami asked, "Are you a college student?" I said, "Yes, Swami." And then he showed that sari, which was being distributed. And he said, "Should I give you the sari?" I said, your wish, Swami. Ungaloda ishtam, Swami. And do you want the sari? I said, "Yes, Swami." If you ask me like that, I will say yes, right? And Swami said, "Okay. Whom shall I give?" Now, this is like asking for recommendation, and it's a very, it's a treacherous area, right? I said, "Swami, whoever you want to give to." And then Swami said, "Okay, I will give." And he started taking out the saris and throwing it to the girls who were sitting right in front, to that senior akka, to my bhajan partner, to the two juniors who were sitting next to me, and he didn't give me. And he went ahead. I said, "Okay, one more lesson. Just keep quiet this time. I'm not going to say anything." And then something told me, "Turn around." So I turned around. This is something you should normally not do when you're seated right in the front. Even if Swami goes past, you're not actually supposed to turn around and see, because the boys' side is right there. Right? So you're just supposed to, even if you have the temptation, wait till he comes back to the front and then look at him. And I just swiveled my head, and Swami turned around. In Tamil, he asked me, "Unaku kudukalala? Yeah, I didn't give you, right?" I said, "No, Swami." "Venuma, do you want?" I said, "Yes, Swami." And he called the lady who was carrying the saris and took it. "Take." And this is the sari what I'm wearing today, which is the one that Swami had given on that day. And we wore it in the afternoon itself, came for darshan, sat right in front. Swami said, "Chala bagundi." I thought I was over the moon. VIP sari I got. I'm so happy. Swami's put me at the top of the ladder. There is, gold medal or no gold medal, I've got his seal of approval. But I didn't realize that a great responsibility was about to descend on my spiritual shoulders. I had a dream the night after. Swami is in Kulwant Hall. He's alone, and I am wearing this sari, and I'm kneeling in front of him. And Swami says, "Do you know why I've given this sari to you?" I said, "Swami, because you're very fond of me." He said, "Okay. The sari should represent 3 things in life, and I want 3 promises from you on this day." Very big words, right? God asking you for a promise. I said, "Okay, Swami, what are you going to ask me?" "Repeat after me. I will always tell the truth. I will never hurt anybody. I will always serve others when they are in need." Repeat. This is what that sari represents, and remember it. When I got up from the dream, I was left wondering, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because in order to follow those promises is an extremely, very, very difficult task, in my opinion, because you have to be constantly aware of your thought, word, and deed 24/7 for you to fulfill any of those promises. Because if you say never, I will always say the truth, it is very deep. Are there any situations where that could be compromised because you feel it is better for another or for yourself? What does it even mean? I will never hurt another. Our words, our actions, whether we like it or not, are accepted by a few and rejected by others because they can cause hurt. And I was a person, as I'd mentioned, who had a lot of anger. I'm saying had because over the years it has been polished down to a great extent. It is still there, but it is at least recognizable and controllable at this point. But it was very, very, very difficult for I was about 20 at the time, to have been asked to give these promises to Bhagwan, and I was quite taken aback that I would need to do this. And in all sincerity, it has not been an easy journey to keep to those promises. And I actually want to thank Anu for this opportunity, because she made me remember it all over again yesterday. And that in the times that we live, it becomes even more important to soak yourself in Swami's Leelas, so that you don't allow even other things that are going on around you to hurt you, and in turn, because of which you cause hurt to another. So it wasn't easy. And I understood that it was not about a gold medal alone. It was about much more. This journey was going to start a lifetime of dedication to being with God unequivocally. And it was not going to be easy. The future has proven from that point to now that it is indeed true. It has not been easy. But I feel blessed that Swami saw something within me to feel that I deserve to be given this lesson directly. Moving forward from there, the final year interview. I think when I'm looking at the time, I have about 5 minutes remaining. If I'm permitted, then I will share.
You have all the time. Go ahead. You have a way of keeping all of us engrossed. Go ahead.
So in our final year, we had a fair number of trials in our connect with Swami, because as a batch, we were very fervently attached to Swami. It was not, each of us had our individual struggles, but as a batch, for us, the focus was we just wanted him. We wanted to hold on to him. We didn't want to let him go. We just wanted him, us, and nothing else. And in that childlike, I own Swami and Swami owns me feeling, very often, we had to take the extreme route of doing all-night Parayanam just to get a chance to go for darshan. And we never thought of it as an extreme step at that point, right? Even if it was exam time, we'll stop studying and sit and do Satcharita Parayanam so that, we'll get a chance to go to Puttaparthi. The interview was not easily earned. There were many background things that had happened before that, not important at this point in time. But as a batch, we were sort of at a cusp where it was believed that we probably didn't deserve the interview. That was the general sort of environment that we were in, because we were quite outspoken with about our faith in Swami, right? And we were sort of led to believe that you would really have to work very hard to get Swami's approval and get his attention. But we prayed very hard. We were taken to Puttaparthi, and Swami interestingly said, interview, very difficult. This afternoon, I'm having, about the water project. There's a huge contingent coming from Chennai. I have no time. So we'll see later. And he went off. And this was the last opportunity, because the exams were to begin the next week. And if we had missed this, that's it. The opportunity would be over. So we all went back to the hostel at Puttaparthi. There's a dormitory that is there for the girls there. And we said, you know what? We are not going to give up. Sathya Sai Baba can't keep us in his hostel for 3 years and then send us off without speaking to us personally. He owes it to us, and we are going to, speak to him the only way that he will understand. We're going to keep singing bhajans till he calls us. I said, we will not eat breakfast. We will not eat lunch. We will not drink water. We will sit. We'll put one photograph of our great mighty Lord in front of us and keep singing till he can't take the singing anymore, and he will call us. Right? And we sang. I think we had come back to the hostel at 9:45. 9:45 to 12:45, we sang continuously without getting up. Not a single person got up even to go to the restroom to have a drink of water. We just sang. We were crying. We were singing. We were crying. We were singing. This was the only thing. 12:50, we heard one of our teachers call out from the lower floor. She said, all of you stop your singing and come down immediately. Swami has called you for the interview at 1:30. We couldn't believe our ears. And we were disheveled, right? We were crying and everything, and we were not in a presentable condition at all. And we were all dying of hunger by that point, but that was a different thing, right? We had refused to go to the canteen when they called us. We did all that rebellion. And then now we were like regretting the fact that we were not getting a moment to just put something quickly in our mouths. But we said, you know what? He's taken us this far. Let's just get ready and go. And we have this tradition. When a batch gets a chance to have an interview with Swami, we have a chit picking system to see how many girls can get an opportunity to offer something to Swami. So this particular thing had happened before we had come to Parthi. We had had an evening where all the names of the final year students had been written, put into a box, and then we'd keep picking it to see, okay, who would get a chance to offer Mangala Aarti with, that is a wick lamp, another one with Karpura Aarti, then flower, dates, fruits, like, you try to subdivide it into as many offerings as possible so that many people will get a chance to go up. For the first time in my 3-year sojourn at Anantapur, I found myself praying, Swami, please make sure that my name is not on that list. I have pushed myself enough in the front, and please let everybody, as many girls who have been craving for your proximity, let them get a chance. Those who have been in the bhajan group, all of us have gotten so many chances to be close to you. So many girls, their devotion, they just want to be close to you for that 1 second, Swami, please. And if your name is picked and then you give it to somebody, it's like martyrdom, right? Nobody wants to take that away from you. So I said, let's not do all that drama. So please, Swami. I think close to 42 names were selected. And it was not a very big batch, right? 42 out of probably 110 or 120 names, your odds are very high of being picked. And my name didn't figure. And I was so happy. For the first time, I was happy that I was not going to be anywhere in the forefront. And one of the other traditions we have is every batch looks at what can we offer during the interview to Swami in the form of a musical offering. And it is amazing. Those of us who are neither lyricists nor composers, see, those of us who sing doesn't mean that we can compose music, right? Everybody is not an A.R. Rahman who can compose as well as sing. We sing because he has given us the grace to do so. But composing is a different ball game. You should know ragam, talam, this, that. There are so many things happening over there. But just when you decide that, Swami, I want to offer this to you, please help me. Somebody who has never written a song in their life suddenly becomes a lyricist. Another person who's been singing all her life but doesn't know the ABC of composing becomes a composer. And that is precisely what happened. One of the girls in our batch, Sister Pavani, on a journey back from Puttaparthi to Anantapur, on the bus, she heard Swami's voice saying, take a paper, I'm going to give you the words to a song. And he dictated the Telugu song to her and she wrote it. To this day, you ask her to write another song, she will not be able to do it, right? She said, that is the only song I've ever written in my life. And she says, I don't know where it came from. I only know that I took dictation. And she wrote and wrote and wrote, and the beauty, the way it sort of came together. And then she gave it to me and said, can you set it to tune? I said, I looked at it. I said, set what to tune? What am I going to start with? Everybody in this gathering would remember Priyamani from a couple of editions ago who had spoken. So Priya and I were in the music group. She was the harmonium player and I used to sing. We were very, very close friends. We were also roommates for a year. So we both looked at it long and hard. She said, Sindhu, where do we start? What ragam? I said, what ragam, Priya? I don't understand anything. Let's just look at it for some time. And we were humming different things. Nothing was happening. Then we put the paper in front of us on the harmonium and said, okay, you know what? Let's just sit and look at the harmonium and the paper. Maybe something will happen. Nothing happened. We just kept staring. And suddenly I just told Priya, can you play these notes? I don't even remember what those notes were. She played something. And I said, there's a tune coming. Let's just try it out. Within the next 10 minutes, the song had been composed. The music just flowed. It was in Telugu. Neither of us understood a word of what we were singing. She's a Palakkad Tamilian, and I'm a Vadama Iyer. So both of us had no idea about this Telugu that we were reading. We didn't even know whether we were pronouncing it correctly, but the tune just flowed. And that was one of the songs that Swami asked us to sing. And he said, during the interview, he said, songs, have you prepared songs? We said, yes, Swami. Telugu? He said, yes, Swami. And he asked us to sing. And the beauty of it, he asked one of the girls in front, give me the talam. And Swami picked up the talam and played the talam for that song. He played along. This is the funniest part of the entire thing. Swami was so engrossed in playing. We sang that song, then we sang a Hindi song that we had composed, and then we sang an English song. Swami continued to play even for the English song. And the strangest thing was, he played the beat of the Telugu song to the English song, completely confusing us. And we were in some other Nadai Talam singing something which it was all over the place and yet so beautiful. Imagine God sitting and playing Pakkavadyam for your singing. And he is in bliss and we are in tears. And it was a moment that should be captured for eternity. And I still remember all of us that, you know, the girls who play talam regularly, they have this affinity, like, those of us who use a certain instrument, however dirty it is, we'll want to play that only. Right? So this was one worn out, brown colored string, which, you know, because she was comfortable using that, and Swami took it from her and they're all like so dirty, so ugly. Swami has taken something which looks so horrible and he's playing with it. And then we realized that talam is so blessed. All the, you know, that dirt or whatever it had on it didn't matter because it had been sanctified by his very touch. And it was more lucky than we were because it was being held in his hands, right? So just that bliss of that entire experience, for the first time, I was able to feel the fullness of being in his presence without expecting anything in return. And it was a beautiful moment because for the first time, I didn't have a desire. For the very first time. I will not say that I've been desireless since then, very far from it. But that moment will always be a lesson that it is possible to exist in that state of desirelessness. And that if we truly immerse ourselves in Bhagwan, he will make it happen. So at this juncture, I'd like to sing that song, which we had the good fortune to offer to Swami. And I hope that it's sort of, with the talking, sometimes it becomes a little difficult to sing, but I will just take a sip of water and then I will sing. అపురూపమైనదమ్మ తల్లి ప్రేమ ఆ ప్రేమకు ప్రతిరూపం సాయినమ్మ సర్వం నీవే అని నమ్ముకున్నా నీ దివ్వెలమై అనుదినము వెలుగుతున్నా నీ చరణాలి శరణి నీవే మా దిక్కని జీవితం అంకితం చేయగా అపురూపమైనదమ్మ తల్లి ప్రేమ ఆ ప్రేమకు ప్రతిరూపం సాయినమ్మ సాయి ప్రేమ ఒక్కటే మహాభాగ్యమై బ్రతుకుతున్నాము సాయి రూపమై సాయి ప్రేమ ఒక్కటే మహాభాగ్యమై బ్రతుకుతున్నాము సాయి దైవమై మా మంచి కొరకు నీవు పడే ఆర్తిలో సాయి నిన్ను మించగలర మరే ఆప్తులు ఏనాటి పుణ్యమో ఈనాటి భాగ్యమై ఏనాటి పుణ్యమో ఈనాటి భాగ్యమై నిస్వార్థమైన నీ ప్రేమ సాయినే వరముగా పొందగా అపురూపమైనదమ్మ తల్లి ప్రేమ ఆ ప్రేమకు ప్రతిరూపం సాయినమ్మ మనసులోని మమత శృతి మించగా సాయిని ప్రేమ చేత కళ్ళు చెమ్మగిల్లేగా మనసులోని మమత శృతి మించగా సాయిని ప్రేమ చేత కళ్ళు చెమ్మగిల్లేగా కదులుతున్న నీటి సాయి స్వర్ణయుగములో నీ శాంతి దూతలమై సాగిపోవాలి. ఏ దేశమేగిన ఏ పీఠం ఎక్కిన, ఏ దేశమేగిన ఏ పీఠం ఎక్కిన, నీ బాటని మేము నడచి జన్మనే సార్థకం చేయగా. అపురూపమైనదమ్మ తల్లి ప్రేమ, ఆ ప్రేమకు ప్రతిరూపం సాయినమ్మా. I love those last couple of lines in the second verse. Wherever we go, whichever country we go, whatever position we take up in life, let your words be the guiding force at all points in time. We didn't realize the beauty of what that meant at that point in time when we were still in the college state, right? We hadn't quite stepped out of the portals. Today it makes sense. We are nothing if it weren't for his words and his guidance. So the reason I wanted to share the song is not so much to sing, but the fact that he had given us a life message through that song, which we are realizing today and not at that point. We thought we were given an opportunity to sing before him. It is for those words to resonate in our minds till our last breath on this planet. So after all this entire journey had sort of culminated and we were out of the college, in the month of June is when we are normally given the declaration of results and who would be getting the medals later in the year, right? I had sort of given up the hope because I knew that I had slipped up and it was okay. But by this time, I did not look upon it as a failure. That too had come a long way. I still felt bad that probably I had let Swami down because the dream was to do his bidding and earn that chain from him. So I wasn't quite sure that I had lived up to his expectation. Come June, I get a call. Actually, at that point in time, I was in Puttaparthi doing seva for about, so soon after my graduation, I decided to stay on in Puttaparthi, Vrindavan and then Puttaparthi for about 6-7 months because I wanted a sort of a gap year just to be with Swami. My parents also graciously agreed and allowed me to be at the ashram. And we had this thing where we would do the security duty, right? The girls who were with Swami. So I was there and my chemistry professor, Rajni ma'am, she called me and she said, we just got the news. The other boy who was in the running for the medal along with you, it turns out that there was actually a slip that had happened in his CGPA in the 3rd semester in English, which had not been looked at. Both of you had a slip in just 1 semester each. You had 5 CGPA all through. He slipped by 6 points. You slipped by 2 points. And because of that, you're getting the gold medal. I didn't have any words. Swami's Sankalpa is something that we cannot understand. We should not try to understand it. I think we are too limited in our intellectual capacity to give any meaning to anything that he does. If he has said that I want to give this to you and you have to earn it, he is the one who is earning it through us. For me to believe that I had to do something to earn it itself was a misnomer. So the fact that I had lived in that 3-year sort of misconception that I had to keep doing something to ensure that I get there hit me at that point. Where was the proof at any point in time in this journey that I had done anything to deserve it because of my own merit? Nothing. There was no question of self-merit in any of this. Yet the ego raises its head. Yet we need so many lessons to keep reminding that you are nothing. So it was a moment of extreme, I would say, humility, that I had to sort of accept that I am nothing. And I need to be happy to be destroyed at every single moment so that Swami can be there inside me instead of my being myself within me. It is a very, very unsettling feeling if one does not accept that that is what Swami wants. And I have experienced it over and over again. For the duration of this talk, I wanted to sort of restrict it only to the 95 to 2002 period. At some point in the future, if I'm ever given and have the opportunity, the journey after that has also been a repeated hammering session, right? And Swami used to say this: all of you are rough diamonds. I am that file which has to bring out the shine and the sheen. But how much you will shine and how precious a diamond you'll become is dependent on how much you're willing to be tested by me. The greater, I am going to go into the chemistry aspect of it, right? The more pressure it is and the more temperature it can withstand, the greater the sheen of that diamond, right? Which means the greater your resistance to that testing, and not resistance in the wrong way, not to give up. It is not resistance to being tested, but resistance to the conditions that you're being put in, and to not give up. Don't give up the effort to be with him. At the same time, surrender to him. It's a very difficult thing to understand, right? Surrender does not mean giving up effort. Surrender means giving up attachment to the result of all those efforts. So it has been an amazingly blissful journey. When I finally received that medal from his hand on November 22nd, 2002, nobody realized at that point the journey that had brought me there. For the world looking on, it was a student who had studied her chemistry course very well and had gotten a medal. And she was blessed because it was being given by the Divine Chancellor. For me, it was none of those things. I still remember after the medal was received, and we used to have these convocation dramas in Purnachandra Auditorium. I took the medal with me and I went and sat next to my chemistry professor. She was one of my greatest mentors, Rajni ma'am. She believed in me every step of the way, in a way that nobody will understand. She looked at me, she hugged me, and she said, "You didn't deserve this. He gave it to you because he loves you." She said, "Purely from an academic standpoint, I know how much you studied and what you actually did to get this, right? But because he believed in you, you got it. Ability, I will not question, but this receipt is because of his grace. Remember that always." So with those, I will not say few words. I've spoken a lot of words today. I would like to sing one last song in English to conclude the session, if I have the permission to do so. What thanks can we render, Sai, for the gifts thou hast showered on us? Every day we will blossom in thy love and light. What thanks can we render, Sai? Mother Sai gives the love of 1,000 mothers. Father Sai gives the care of 1,000 fathers. Guru Sai imparts the knowledge of 1,000 teachers. The ways chosen are innumerable. The ways chosen are inexplicable. What thanks can we render, Sai, for thy mercy and thy love, for thy mercy and thy love? How can we repay thee? How can we repay thee? We will offer thee ourselves. We will offer thee ourselves, for we belong to thee. Yes, we belong to thee, for we belong to thee. Yes, we belong to thee. What thanks can we render, Sai? Sai Ram.
Oh, what a talk. I mean, I don't have words to I shouldn't say anything after this, to be honest.
All you can say one thing now. Part two is definitely on the card.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's a question of time. So I'm going to leave the two of you to figure that out.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's one small thing that's really struck me as subtle thing was love, pure love is much bigger than our definition of deservedness. You know, it's so much. I mean, it's beyond our comprehension. Pure love. With that, I'll just want to stop it. I think this have 21 Samasta Lokas.
Yeah, just before we do that, so that we'll close it off. Thank you so very much. Last minute, but I can tell you the commonness of all of us having the customized message and customized experience that he beautifully gives to each one of us in our lives. I think you kind of reignited the thought in us to value what we have had, to know him, to be in his grace. And I would say you probably had us like, we wanted to wait for that gold medal to come. Some people have that storytelling. We knew that the gold medal was there because it was there in the bio. But then the wait to reach there, I wouldn't say it's storytelling, it's experience that comes right from the heart. And one of the best satsang is somebody mentioned for quite some time because it's so soulful. And the final English bhajan, my God, it resonates the feeling that all of us have for Swami. So please, please, please block a date. Next month, we'll have part 2. That's for sure. Sister Priya is also here. So by the way, the request goes to the batch. We need to have a satsang. We've been talking about Ruchir sir many times in the satsang, and he's gone. Like that, we should not, as you said, when we have a thought in our mind, we should do it. Some of the thought of sharing Jayama's lessons to all of you has been in our hearts. Let's just do it. I leave Sister Anupama to discuss the modus operandi. It'll be nice if you have a group of you who can have what I call like a group discussion on the topic, and we all can learn about these Mahanubhavas who have served in his portals. Also, one last announcement. The next week's satsang will happen at 9 a.m. because we have the Hyderabad boy, as Brother Kota Shivakumar is known, who is going to be speaking about Omkaram and Suprabhatam. So he wants to do it at a time when we can say it as well. So it's going to be a satsang, a topical satsang on Omkaram and Suprabhatam, which will be at 9 a.m. Singapore. It will be 10 a.m. Singapore, 7:30 a.m. India, next Sunday. Next Sunday, the speaker is already fixed. Thanks to last week, we have had multiple speakers who have been called to say, are you available? So Brother Kota Shivakumar is going to address us next Sunday, 7:30 a.m. India, 10 a.m. Singapore, on the topic Omkaram and Suprabhatam. That will be the satsang for next week. So thank you so very much, Sister. Samasta Lokas.
Please join us as we chant 21 Samasta Lokas. Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu. 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 समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु 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 ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।
Sai Ram, everyone, stay safe. Looking forward to seeing you all next Sunday. Same, it's not the same time. Do note that. Sai Ram. Sai Ram, sister, thank you so very much once again.
Sai Ram Sinduja, Sai Ram.